South Side, Chicago, 700 block of South Vernon Avenue. It is cold, quiet, almost empty. A brown Chevrolet is sitting on the street, engine off, lights off, no movement inside. At first, it does not look like much, just another parked car in a city full of them. People pass by. Some notice it, most don't, but one person stops, not because they see something obvious, but because something feels wrong. The car has been sitting there too long, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, so they make a call. Police arrive. To them, this is routine, a suspicious vehicle, nothing unusual. They walk around the car, check the windows, look inside. Everything seems normal, no broken glass, no blood, no sign of struggle. Just a car sitting still. Then they open the trunk, and everything changes. Inside is a body, a young man. His hands are bound, his body is stiff, frozen from the cold. There are clear signs of violence. This was not an accident. This was not random, this was intentional. The scene goes from routine to homicide. The body is taken in. Fingerprints are run through the system, and within a short time a name comes back: Angelo Roberts, also known as Chief Lowe, 24 years old. And suddenly this case becomes something much bigger, because this is not just any victim. At that exact moment, the Chicago Police Department was looking for him. The ATF was looking for him. The FBI was looking for him. 3 separate agencies, all hunting the same man for months. His face had been broadcast across the country. Featured on national television, he was not hiding quietly. He was one of the most wanted men in America. And yet none of those agencies caught him. No arrest, no chase that ended in handcuffs, no courtroom. Instead, he was found in the trunk of a car, dead on the south side of Chicago, a place that was not even his territory. That detail matters, because Angelo Roberts was a West Side figure. His power, his influence, his network, all West Side. He had no reason to be there. He did not belong on that block, which means one thing: he did not end up there by chance. Someone brought him there, someone he trusted enough to meet, to answer, to show up for. And that is where the mystery begins to deepen. Because the person who called the police, the one who reported the car, has never been identified, not once. No name, no statement made public, no trace. 30 years have passed. No arrests have been made. No suspects officially named. The case is still open, and all that remains is a single unanswered question. If every federal agency was trying to catch Angelo Roberts, then who found him first? And more importantly, who made the call that led him to that cart on that street on that night? Oh, Henry Horner Holmes, before you understand what Angelo Roberts became, you have to understand where he came from. Because places like that do not just shape people, they decide who survives and who doesn't. West Side, Chicago. Henry Horner Holmes. On paper, it was a solution. Built in 1957, the city called it an answer to poverty. Affordable housing, a fresh start. But what they actually built was something very different. The buildings were cheap. Cinder block walls that held the cold. Steel elevators that barely worked. Long hallways that felt empty even when they weren't. There were no real doors, no secure entrances, no system to keep anyone out. Every building had a tunnel running straight through it. Open, anyone could walk in from one side to the other without ever being seen or stopped. And over time, that space stopped belonging to the people who lived there. It was taken over, not officially, not on paper, but in reality completely. By the early 1990s, even the Chicago Housing Authority admitted it. This was the most troubled development in the entire system. Not one of the worst, because inside those towers, a control did not belong to the city, it belonged to the gangs. They did not just sell drugs there, They controlled movement, who could stand where, who could walk through which hallway, who could use which stairwell. Every floor had a presence, every building had a system, and the people living there, they had to adjust. Life inside Henry Horner homes was not normal. You did not move freely, you did not speak freely, you learned early who to look at and who to avoid, where to stand and where not to stand. Even children understood it, especially children, because they had no choice. There are stories from that time of kids sleeping on the floor instead of beds, not for comfort, for survival. Because bullets came through windows at night, random, fast, without warning, and the floor was safer than the bed. Think about that for a second. When a child learns how to sleep based on where bullets might land, that is not childhood anymore. That is training. A journalist once spent years documenting life in those buildings, following two young brothers just trying to make it through. And their mother said something that people still remember. There are no children here, not because there were no kids, but because childhood did not exist there. Everyone grew up fast, or they didn't grow up at all. And somewhere in those same buildings during those same years, there was a young boy named Angelo Roberts. But unlike others, no one followed his story, no interviews, no records, no detailed history. His early life is almost completely silent. And that silence matters, because when there is no record, no clear beginning, you are left trying to understand a person only by what they became later. But people are not built overnight. They are shaped slowly, by pressure, by environment, by what they see every single day. In a place like Henry Horner homes, power becomes protection, respect becomes survival, and weakness gets noticed. Quickly, if you grow up there, you learn that trust is limited, that loyalty is everything, and that fear can be used. Some people try to escape that kind of environment. Some people get trapped in it, and some learn how to control it. Angelo Roberts did not just survive that world. He understood it. He moved inside it. He learned its rules, even the unspoken ones. And once you understand a system like that, you do not just live in it anymore. You start to rise inside it. But here is the part people miss. Places like Henry Horner homes do not create random outcomes. They create patterns, cycles. And once you step into that cycle, it is very hard to step out, because everything around you keeps pulling you back in. The same buildings, the same people, the same rules, and eventually the same ending. Years later, when Angelo Roberts was found dead in a car trunk on the other side of the city, that moment did not start there. It started here, in those buildings, in those hallways, in a place where survival came first and everything else came after. Before Angelo Roberts ever touched power, the war had already started, not on the streets, not with guns. Inside the organization itself. To understand this, you have to go back to the beginning of the Four Corner Hustlers. Late 1960s, West Garfield Park, a man named Walter Wheat builds something from nothing, not just a gang, but a structure. It had rules, clear ones: protect the neighborhood, do not prey on your own people, no drugs. For a time, those rules meant something. The group was small, controlled, disciplined. Wheat's word was final. Then the city changed. The 1980s hits and crack cocaine spread through Chicago like a shockwave. Everything shifted. Money got bigger, faster, more dangerous. And with that money came a new kind of thinking. A man named Monroe Banks, known as Money, came out of prison in 1987 with a vision. He did not want the old rules. He did not want limits. He wanted expansion, power, independence. He looked at the Four Corner Hustlers and saw something bigger than what Wheat had built. So he made a move. He pushed the organization toward crack cocaine, toward fast money, and more importantly, he pushed them away from the vice lords. That alliance had defined them for years. It gave them protection, identity, connections. Banks wanted none of it. He introduced a new symbol, the black diamond, clean, sharp, unbreakable. It was not just a logo, it was a message. We are not them anymore. Wheat said no. But for the first time his word was not enough. Banks had the younger generation. He had the energy. He had the streets, and slowly control shifted. But here is what most people miss. The split was never clean. It did not end in one moment. It did not resolve. It stayed under the surface, because not everyone moved with Banks. The older members, the ones who built their lives under wheat, they did not fully accept it, especially the ones in prison. Inside those walls, affiliations matter more than anything. Vice Lord ties meant protection, status. Survival, you do not give that up just because someone on the outside changes the flag. So now, you have one organization with two identities. On one side, the Black Diamond, younger, aggressive, independent. On the other, the old guard, loyal to wheat, connected to the vice lords. Same name, same history, but completely different loyalties, and no trust between them. That tension sat there for years. Waiting, then Angelo Roberts walked into it. When he came home in the early 1990s, he did not inherit stability. He inherited a fracture, two sides, one position of power, and he chose his side clearly. Black Diamond, all the way young, ambitious, aggressive, not the choice the old guard would have made, not the leader they would have picked. And that matters, because power in that kind of environment is never just given. It is watched, tested, challenged. Roberts was not just stepping into leadership. He was stepping into a silent conflict that had been building for over a decade. A conflict between history and change, between loyalty and ambition, between the men who built the foundation and the ones ready to rebuild it in their own image. And here is the part that connects everything back to his death. When you have two sides inside one organization, both with reason to feel betrayed, both with reason to fight, you create something dangerous, not chaos, something quieter, a list of people who have motive, a list of people who have access, a list of people who know exactly how to get close because they are already inside. By the time Roberts took control, this was no longer just a gang. It was a divided system holding itself together just enough to function, but not enough to stay loyal. And when loyalty breaks like that, it does not explode all at once. It waits for the right moment, for the right reason, for the right call. And when that moment comes, the most dangerous enemy is not across the street. It is already sitting at the same table. By the time Angelo Roberts came back into the picture, he was not just another name in the streets anymore. He had become something else, a leader, a connector, a decision-maker inside a broken system, and in that world, status is not given. It is taken. He moved fast after returning, no hesitation, no waiting. He immediately started building influence again inside the four-corner hustlers. Not slowly, not carefully, but aggressively. He understood something very important. Vacuum of power never stays empty. If you don't fill it, someone else will. So he moved into that space quickly. Former Gangster Stones members, people he once knew from the West Side, they began shifting under his direction. Territory started expanding again. Street control started reorganizing. And slowly Roberts was not just a member anymore. He was becoming the center of gravity. But power in that world always has a cost. Every move creates a reaction. Every rise creates resistance, and Roberts' rise was not happening in peace. It was happening inside tension that was already alive between old loyalty and new ambition. Then something happened that changed everything around him, not one event, but a chain of events. Violence started increasing inside the structure. People who had history with the organization, people tied to its early foundation, started disappearing or being killed. First came Tony Davis, a key figure controlling drug flow during Roberts' absence. He was killed in 1994. That death created shockwaves because it wasn't random street violence. It looked targeted, controlled, a message more than a murder, and after that things escalated. Walter Wheat, the original founder, the man who built the Four Corner Hustlers from the ground up, the man who once guided the entire structure, was shot and killed in July 1994. He was sitting in a car, waiting, normal moment. Then a teenager on a bicycle approached and ended his life in seconds. That teenager, Bobby Cooley, would later be tied to multiple killings, but in the streets, people saw something deeper. Because Wheat was not just a man, he was history, and history does not usually get removed randomly. It gets replaced. Not long after that, another senior figure, Richard Goodwin, was also killed. Same shooter. Same pattern. 2 major losses in a short time, both tied to the old structure, both connected to the early identity of the organization. And slowly, one truth started forming in people's minds. This was not chaos. This was transition, a shift in control, a silent removal of the old guard. And whether Roberts ordered it or simply benefited from it, his position was becoming stronger with every removal. By late 1994, federal attention was no longer just watching the organization. It was targeting it. Indictments started forming. Surveillance increased. Names started appearing in reports. And then the final move came. Federal charges were announced. Roberts and multiple associates were officially indicted. But when arrests started happening, Roberts was not there. He had already disappeared from the immediate reach of law enforcement, and this is where the story shifts again. Because instead of going silent, instead of hiding completely, he moved differently. He went south. Atlanta, far from Chicago, far from his base, far from the center of pressure. And instead of disappearing, he started rebuilding. Even with his name on national television, even with law enforcement actively searching, he was still organizing, still connecting people, still maintaining influence. That decision changed how everyone saw him, because most fugitives try to survive. They go quiet, they avoid attention, but Roberts was not acting like someone in survival mode. He was acting like someone who still believed the structure could be controlled. That belief is dangerous, because it keeps you close to the system that is trying to destroy you. Eventually, he came back toward Chicago. We don't know exactly why. We don't know who called him back. We don't know what conversation pulled him into motion again. But he returned, and that return placed him directly back into a city where every agency was already looking for him. Every move he made now was under pressure. Every connection was risky. Every meeting carried weight. And this is where everything begins to tighten. Because by the time he returned, he was no longer just dealing with street politics. He was dealing with a city-wide manhunt, federal pressure, internal conflict, old loyalty still unresolved. All of it existed at the same time, and when too many forces exist in one space, something always gives. The question was not if something would break. The question was when, and who would be standing closest when it happened. By late 1994, everything around Angelo Roberts was under pressure, not just from the streets, but from every direction at once. Federal agencies were closing in. Indictments had already been announced. His name was no longer hidden. It was public, and once your name reaches that level, you stop living normally. Every phone call becomes suspicious. Every meeting feels watched. Every familiar voice carries risk. But the most dangerous part is not the pressure from enemies. It is the pressure from inside your own world. Because in that kind of environment, you never really know who is still on your side, or who is just waiting for the right moment. After moving between Chicago and Atlanta, Roberts was not fully in one place anymore. He was connected everywhere but grounded nowhere. That kind of position creates instability, and instability creates openings. Somewhere during this time, a call was made. We don't know the exact voice. We don't know the exact words. We don't know the full conversation, but we know the result. Roberts responded. He agreed to come to a location on the south side of Chicago. Inglewood, 700 block of South Vernon Avenue, a place far from his main territory, a place outside his natural control. And that detail is important, because Angelo Roberts was not someone who moved blindly. He understood his environment. He understood risk. He understood distance. So for him to go there, it means one thing. He believed the call was real. He believed the person on the other end. Trust was the key. That trust became the entry point. On January 17th, 1995, he arrived. At first, everything seemed normal from the outside. No visible chaos, no signs of a setup, no immediate danger. But setups do not announce themselves, they wait. The moment he was in position, control shifted. He was overpowered. Restrained, beaten, there was no fair fight, no warning, no chance to react. Everything happened fast and deliberately. This was not random violence. This was controlled. After that, something unusual happened. Something that stands out in every version of the story. They allowed him to make a phone call to his mother. Think about that for a moment. A man who is restrained completely under control of whoever is holding him, and still they stop. They allow him one final connection. That detail changes everything about the nature of the situation. Because that is not typical street behavior. That is not random brutality. That is selective control. Someone there knew him well enough to understand what that moment meant. After the call, the situation ended. He was killed, and then he was placed in a car trunk and left on South Vernon Avenue, far from his base, far from his influence, far from the people who would normally react first. The discovery came later that night. A passerby noticed the vehicle. It looked out of place. Police were called. The trunk was opened, and the case shifted instantly from suspicion to homicide. When fingerprints confirmed his identity, everything escalated. This was not just a local killing anymore. This was the death of a man who had been actively hunted by multiple federal agencies, yet none of them had reached him. Someone else had. And that is where the real mystery begins, because once the body was found, there was no clear suspect, no immediate arrest, no public identification of the caller, just silence, and in that silence, two possibilities started forming. One, internal betrayal, someone from his own world, someone with access, someone who understood trust better than force. Or two, a separate force entirely, a situation outside gang logic, a move that had nothing to do with loyalty and everything to do with elimination. But neither theory has ever been proven, and that is what keeps this case alive, because in most stories there is an ending, an arrest, a confession, a resolution. But here there is only a question that still remains after 30 years. Who made the call that brought Angelo Roberts to that street on that night when everything stopped? When Angelo Roberts was found, the case should have ended there. A body recovered, an identity confirmed, a crime scene processed. That is how most cases close. But this one did not, because even after his death, nothing became clear. No arrests were made, No suspect was officially named. No one stepped forward publicly to take responsibility. Just a file marked open and silence around it. 30 years passed after that night, and still the same question remains. Who brought him there? Who made the call? And why has no one ever been held accountable? Over time, two main theories started to form, not officially confirmed, not proven in court, but discussed quietly in the streets and in records. The first theory is internal betrayal, people from within his own world, former allies, old loyalties that never fully disappeared. The four-corner hustlers were not unified. They had been split for years. Old guard versus new direction. Past loyalty versus new power. In that kind of structure, revenge does not always come fast. Sometimes it waits. It builds slowly until the right moment appears. And Angelo Roberts had made many decisions that could have created enemies inside his own circle. The removal of senior figures, the shift in leadership, the speed of his rise, all of it created tension that never fully cooled down. In this theory, the South Side location makes sense because it would require trust, someone he would respond to, someone who knew how to reach him, and someone who knew what to do after he arrived. But there is another theory, and it is more disturbing in a different way, that external forces were involved. Law enforcement pressure had been building for a long time. He was not just a street figure anymore. He was a federal target. He had allegedly been linked to serious weapons activity. He had been under surveillance. He had already escaped one major federal trap, and according to some interpretations of the timeline, he was becoming too unpredictable to contain. In that version of events, someone decided not to wait anymore, not for court, not for trial, not for process. But again, there is no proof, only speculation, and that is what makes this case different, because in most cases, evidence slowly reveals truth. Here, evidence only deepens confusion. Even the location raises questions. South Vernon Avenue, Inglewood, far from his territory, far from his base of loyalty. That distance matters because it suggests planning, not randomness. It suggests control over movement, not chance. And when you combine that with the detail of the phone call, the case becomes even more complex. A final call was allowed to his mother. That moment has never been fully explained. It does not fit normal violence. It does not fit random street killing. It suggests recognition, familiarity, or intent beyond simple elimination. And after that call, there was nothing. No final struggle reported publicly. No clear witness account released. No confirmed suspect, just an end, and then silence. His funeral followed. His family made a decision that stood out. They chose a standing casket. He would not be laid down. He would stand upright even in death, a symbolic gesture, as if refusing to let his story end quietly. But even that moment did not answer anything. After his death, the organization he once led did not disappear. It changed shape. New leadership emerged. New structures formed. Operations continued in different forms. And years later, the same organization would still appear in federal cases, still tied to indictments, still part of ongoing investigations even decades later. That creates a strange reality. A man dies, but the system he was part of continues. Which raises another question. Did his death stop anything, or did it simply remove one layer of control so something else could continue underneath? Even today, people connected to the case still do not agree on what happened. Some believe it was internal revenge finally completed. Some believe it was a calculated external removal. Some believe it was a combination of both worlds colliding. But none of these answers have ever been confirmed, And maybe that is why this story still circulates after so many years, because it does not end properly. There is no final explanation that closes everything, no statement that settles the truth. Only distance, time, and unanswered questions. And in the center of it all, a single moment on a cold night in Chicago, where a man got into a car, believing he was going to meet someone he could trust, and never came back out alive. 30 years later, the question has not changed. It is still the same. Who made that call, and why has no one ever answered for it? 30 years later, the case is still open. No answers, no arrest, no closure, just one question that never changed. Who made that call that brought Angelo Roberts to that street, and why,